He threw out his wife with their newborn twins, in the rain, left her homeless, still bleeding from childbirth, with nowhere to go and no one to call, while he stood in the doorway with his mistress, laughing as she stumbled into the darkness like she was nothing more than trash he'd finally gotten rid of. She collapsed at a bus stop that night, soaking wet, her body broken, her babies crying against her chest, and the only thing she had left was a single message on her phone from a father she thought had been dead for 3 years, a message that said 4 words, "I prepared for this." What her husband didn't know, what he never even suspected, was that the mansion he just threw her out of, the accounts he'd been draining, the life he thought he'd stolen, none of it belonged to him. And in 3 weeks, Clara Ward would walk back through those doors in a way that would shatter everything he believed about power, control, and who really owned his entire world. Before we dive into how the crack started, if you want to see how Clara completely destroyed her husband, reclaimed everything he stole, and walked out of that courtroom victorious, hit that subscribe button right now and drop a comment telling us what time it is, where you're watching from. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. The rain hit like bullets against Clara's skin as she stood barefoot on the marble steps, her newborn twins pressed against her chest. The mansion behind her glowed with golden light, warm and untouchable, like a memory she could no longer claim. Her night dress clung to her body, soaked through, but the cold didn't register. Nothing registered except the weight of her babies and the sound of the door slamming shut behind her. "You're dead weight, Clara. Leave." His voice had been flat, mechanical, like he was reading from a script he'd rehearsed. Marcus stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 security guards, his eyes empty of everything they'd once held. Or maybe they'd always been empty. Maybe she'd just been too in love to notice. "Marcus, please." Her voice cracked. "The twins are only 3 days old. Just let me stay until morning. Please." He didn't even blink. "You heard me. Get out." Behind him, Vanessa appeared, the woman who'd been his assistant, his confidant, his excuse for late nights and business trips. She wore Clara's robe, the silk one Marcus had given her last Christmas. Vanessa's smile was slow and satisfied, like she'd won a prize she'd been chasing for years. "This is awkward," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Maybe you should have been more useful." Clara's hands tightened around her babies. One of them whimpered, a tiny sound that cut through the rain. She wanted to scream, to fight, to demand answers, but her body was still healing from the C-section, her stitches pulling with every breath. She had no strength left for rage, only survival. "I gave you everything," Clara whispered. 6 years, Marcus. 6 years of my life. And what did I get?" Marcus stepped forward, his face twisted with contempt. "A wife who couldn't even manage a simple dinner party without embarrassing me. A wife whose family had nothing to offer. You were charity, Clara. I married you out of pity." The words landed like fists. Clara stumbled back, her bare feet slipping on the wet stone. She caught herself, adjusted the twins, and forced herself to breathe. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, a lesson learned in childhood. When they think you're broken, that's when you watch. That's when you learn. That's when you prepare. "Fine." Clara's voice steadied. "I'll go." She turned and walked down the steps, each one agony, each one measured. The suitcase in her free hand felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Behind her, she heard Vanessa laugh, high and cruel. "Look at her, Marcus. She's not even going to fight." Marcus said nothing. The door closed. The light stayed on. Clara reached the iron gate and stopped. The street stretched out before her, empty and dark. The rain poured harder. One of the twins started crying, a wail that pierced the night. Then the other joined in, their voices small and desperate. She had nowhere to go. No family. No money. Her phone had 3% battery. Her body screamed for rest. "Shoo, babies. Shoo." She rocked them gently, her voice breaking. "Mama's got you. Mama's got you." She didn't know if she was lying. Then her phone buzzed. Once. Twice. She shifted the twins, pulled the phone from her pocket, and stared at the screen. A message from an unknown number. "Your father prepared for this." Clara's breath caught. Her father had been dead for 8 years. Heart attack. Sudden. Gone before she could say goodbye. What kind of sick joke was this? Another message appeared. Open the attachment. Trust no one. Wait. Her fingers trembled as she tapped the screen. A video file loaded, slow and grainy. Then his face appeared. Her father. Older than she remembered, thinner, but unmistakably him. His eyes were sharp, focused, burning with something she'd never seen before. Clara. His voice crackled through the phone speaker. If you're watching this, it means everything I feared has happened. It means Marcus has shown his true nature. And it means you're alone. Tears blurred her vision. She pressed the phone closer, as if she could reach through the screen and touch him. I knew this might happen, her father continued. I saw the way he looked at you. The way he looked at your mother and me. Like we were beneath him. Like you were a stepping stone. So I prepared. Everything you need is waiting. The mansion you just left? It's yours. The accounts he's been using? They're yours. Every dollar he spent, every lie he's told, every bit of security he thinks he has? It's built on something I controlled. And now you control it. Clara's knees buckled. She sank onto the curb, the twins still pressed against her chest. No, she whispered. No, that's impossible. There's a lawyer, her father said. Her name is Margaret Hale. She has everything. Documents, deeds, recordings. She's been watching him for 3 years. Watching them. Waiting for this moment. Call her in the morning. Do not call tonight. Do not react. Let him think he's won. Let him celebrate. Let him get comfortable. And then, Clara, you take everything back. The video ended. The screen went black. Clara sat there, rain pouring over her, the twins crying against her chest, and something inside her shifted. The humiliation didn't vanish. The pain didn't fade. But underneath it, something harder began to form. Something cold and sharp and patient. She stood, adjusted the twins, and started walking. A bus stop glowed in the distance, a small shelter with a bench. She made it there, collapsed onto the seat, and pulled the twins close. They quieted, sensing her heartbeat, her warmth. She stared out at the empty street and thought about Marcus, about Vanessa, about the mansion and the life she'd just lost. Across the city, on a rooftop terrace, Marcus raised a glass of champagne. Vanessa draped herself across his lap, laughing. Freedom tastes good, doesn't it? She purred. Marcus grinned. Best decision I ever made. They didn't know that every light in that mansion, every dollar in those accounts, every piece of security they felt was about to disappear. They didn't know that the woman they'd thrown away was already planning her return. They didn't know that the humiliation they'd inflicted was the spark that would burn their world down. Clara pulled her twins closer and whispered into the rain. I'll protect you. I'll win. And they'll never see me coming. Morning arrived gray and cold. The kind of morning that felt like the world had forgotten color. Clara sat in Mrs. Chen's apartment, wrapped in blankets that smelled like lavender and old memories, staring at her phone like it held the answers to questions she didn't know how to ask. The twins slept in a makeshift crib beside her, their tiny chests rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Mrs. Chun, her elderly neighbor who'd always treated her like the daughter she'd lost years ago, poured weak tea into chipped mugs and said nothing. Sometimes silence was the only kindness that made sense. Clara's hands shook as she replayed her father's video for the third time. His face filled the small screen, older and worn, but his eyes burned with a clarity that made her chest ache. Your father prepared for this, the message had said. But how? How does a dead man prepare for betrayal 8 years in advance? How does a man who worked as a warehouse manager his entire life own a mansion worth millions? Nothing about the last 12 hours made sense. And yet here she was, holding proof that everything she thought she knew about her life had been a lie. You need to eat something, Mrs. Chun said softly, placing a bowl of congee on the table. Clara shook her head. I can't. Not yet. Mrs. Chun sat down across from her, her wrinkled hands folded in her lap. That man threw you out like garbage. Your baby's not even a week old. And now you tell me your father, God rest his soul, left you something? Clara, you need to be careful. Rich people don't give up power easy. Clara nodded, but her mind was already somewhere else. The video had mentioned a portal, a hidden access point embedded in the message. She'd found it in the early hours of the morning, tucked inside a symbol she'd almost missed. Her father had always been careful, deliberate, the kind of man who measured twice and cut once. She tapped the symbol again, and the portal opened, revealing files, documents, spreadsheets, legal papers with names and numbers that made her dizzy. "What is all this?" she whispered. The first document was a trust deed. The Ward family trust, established 20 years ago, listing her as the sole beneficiary upon certain conditions. The mansion on Riverside Drive, the one Marcus had kicked her out of, was listed as property of the trust. Not his property. Not even jointly owned. Hers. The realization hit her like a wave. She scrolled further. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, insurance policies, all under her father's control, all designed to activate the moment she was betrayed or abandoned. How did he know? How did he see this coming when she'd been so blind? "Clara." Mrs. Chen's voice pulled her back. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I think I have," Clara said, her voice barely a whisper. She clicked on another file, and another video began to play. Her father appeared again, but this time he looked directly into the camera, like he could see her, like he was sitting right across from her. "If you're watching this second video, it means you found the portal. Good. That means you're ready to listen." His voice was steady, calm, the same voice that used to read her bedtime stories when she was little. "I need you to understand something, Clara. I wasn't just a warehouse manager. That was the cover, the story I told to keep you safe. I worked in asset management for very wealthy people, people who needed their money hidden, protected, moved quietly. I was good at it. Too good. And over the years, I built something of my own. Something for you." Clara's breath caught in her throat. Mrs. Chen leaned closer, her eyes wide. "What's he saying?" "He's saying he lied to me," Clara whispered. "My whole life he lied." Her father continued. "I saw Marcus the first time you brought him home. I saw the way he looked at our house, at your mother's jewelry, at you. Like you were something he could use. I hired investigators. I watched him. And everything I feared came true. He married you for access, for the appearance of stability, for the connections he thought your family didn't have. But he didn't know about me, about what I'd built, about what I'd hidden." The video showed a series of documents flashing across the screen, each one stamped and notarized. The mansion was purchased through a shell company I controlled. Marcus thinks his name is on the deed, because I made sure he saw a fake one. The real deed has always listed you as the owner, held in trust until you turned 30 or until you were abandoned, whichever came first. The accounts he's been spending from? They're yours. Every dollar I funneled into his business, every loan I co-signed, every investment he thought was his? It all reverts to you the moment he violates the terms of the trust. Clara's hands covered her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. "Papa," she whispered. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her father's face softened. "Because I wanted you to be happy. I wanted to believe I was wrong about him. But I also wanted to make sure that if I wasn't wrong, you'd have a way out. You'd have power. You'd have proof." The screen shifted to a contact card. Margaret Hale, attorney at law. A phone number. An address. Margaret has been watching Marcus for 3 years. She has recordings, financial statements, evidence of affairs, fraud, everything you'll need. But Clara, listen to me. Do not move too fast. Let him think he's won. Let him get comfortable. Let him make mistakes. And then, when the time is right, you take it all back. Not with anger. Not with violence. With evidence. With the law. With patience. The video ended. Clara sat in stunned silence, the phone still glowing in her hands. Mrs. Chen reached across the table and gripped her wrist. "You believe him?" Clara nodded slowly. "I don't know how, but yes. I believe him." "Then what are you going to do?" Clara looked at the twins, still sleeping peacefully, their tiny faces perfect and unaware. She thought about Marcus, about Vanessa, about the way they'd laughed as she walked away. She thought about the mansion, the life she'd lost, the humiliation that still burned in her chest. And then she thought about her father, about the years he'd spent preparing for this moment, about the trust he'd placed in her to finish what he'd started. "I'm going to call Margaret Hale," Clara said, her voice steady for the first time since the expulsion. "And then I'm going to do exactly what Papa said. I'm going to let them think they've won. I'm going to watch. I'm going to wait. And then I'm going to take everything back." Mrs. Chen smiled, a slow, satisfied smile. "Your father raised you right." Clara picked up her phone and dialed the number. It rang once, twice. Then a crisp, professional voice answered. "Margaret Hale speaking." "My name is Clara Ward," she said, her voice strong, clear, no longer broken. "My father told me to call you." There was a pause. Then Margaret's voice softened, just slightly. "I've been waiting for this call for 3 years. Are you ready?" Clara looked at her twins, at the files on her phone, at the life she was about to reclaim. "Yes," she said. "I'm ready." Margaret Hale's office sat on the 14th floor of a building that smelled like old money and new ambition. Clara arrived exactly at 9 in the morning, the twins strapped to her chest in a double carrier Mrs. Chun had lent her. Her clothes were borrowed, her hair still damp from a quick shower, but her spine was straight and her eyes were clear. She'd spent the night reading every document her father had left, memorizing names and numbers until they burned into her brain. If she was going to reclaim her life, she needed to understand every weapon in her arsenal. The receptionist, a young woman with perfect makeup and a practiced smile, looked Clara up and down with barely concealed judgment. "Do you have an appointment?" "Margaret is expecting me," Clara said, her voice calm. "Tell her Clara Ward is here." The receptionist's expression shifted from dismissal to surprise. She picked up the phone, whispered something, then nodded. "She'll see you now. Last door on the right." Margaret's office was all dark wood and leather, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The woman behind the desk was in her 50s, gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, wearing a navy suit that looked like it cost more than Clara's entire wardrobe. But her eyes were kind, sharp, and assessing. The eyes of someone who'd seen too many battles to waste time on pleasantries. "Clara Ward," Margaret said, standing and extending her hand. "Your father spoke about you constantly. He was convinced this day would come. I'm only sorry he was right." Clara shook her hand, the grip firm and steady. "Thank you for seeing me." "Sit," Margaret said, gesturing to the chair across from her. Clara sat, adjusting the twins who stirred but didn't wake. Margaret studied her for a moment, then opened a thick folder on her desk. "Before we begin, I need to know something. Are you here for revenge, or are you here for justice?" Clara didn't hesitate. "Justice." "Good," Margaret said. "Because revenge is messy and expensive. Justice is clean and permanent. Your father understood that. He spent 15 years building a case that couldn't be broken, couldn't be argued, couldn't be bought off. What Marcus did to you 3 nights ago wasn't just cruel. It was the final piece of evidence we needed to activate the trust and reclaim every asset he's been exploiting." She slid a document across the desk. Clara picked it up, her eyes scanning the legal language. The Ward Family Trust, established in 2010, listing her as the sole beneficiary. The mansion on Riverside Drive, purchased through a shell company her father controlled. Held in trust until Clara turned 30 or was abandoned by her spouse. She was 29. The abandonment clause had been triggered the moment Marcus threw her out. "He owns nothing," Clara whispered. "Not the house, not the cars, not even the business he thinks he built." "Correct," Margaret said. "The venture capital firm Marcus runs? Your father was the silent investor. Every dollar Marcus used to start that company came from your father's accounts, funneled through offshore holdings to make it look like Marcus had outside investors. He didn't. It was always your father's money, which means it's now your money." Clara felt something cold and powerful settle in her chest. "Why didn't my father just tell me?" "Because he loved you," Margaret said simply. "And he wanted to believe Marcus would prove him wrong. He hoped that marriage, children, time would change Marcus into the man you thought he was. But your father was also a realist. He knew men like Marcus don't change. They just get better at hiding." She pulled out another file, this one thicker. For the last 3 years, I've had investigators documenting everything. Affairs, financial fraud, tax evasion, misuse of trust funds. Marcus has been stealing from you since the day you got married. He's been funneling money into offshore accounts, buying properties under shell companies, building a financial empire he thinks is untouchable. But every transaction can be traced back to your father's original investment, which means every asset Marcus thinks he owns is legally yours. Clara's hands tightened on the document. What about Vanessa? Margaret's smile was thin and dangerous. Vanessa Chun is an interesting case. She's been on Marcus's payroll for 4 years, officially as his executive assistant. Unofficially, she's been his mistress for 3. She also happens to be embezzling funds from the company, small amounts at first, but it's escalated. Marcus doesn't know, because he's too arrogant to check his own books. But we know, and when the time comes, she'll go down with him. Clara looked at the twins, their tiny faces peaceful against her chest. I don't want them to know their father as a criminal. Then we'll be strategic, Margaret said. We won't destroy him. We'll simply take back what's yours and let him live with the consequences of his choices. But Clara, you need to understand something. This won't be fast. We need to let him get comfortable. Let him think he's won. Let him make mistakes. The more confident he gets, the sloppier he'll be. And when he's at his most vulnerable, we strike. Clara nodded slowly. How long? Weeks, maybe a month. We need documentation, we need witnesses, and we need him to incriminate himself. Can you be patient? Clara thought about the rain, the cold marble steps, the sound of the door slamming. She thought about Vanessa's smile, Marcus's contempt, the way they dismissed her like she was nothing. Yes, she said. I can be patient. Margaret leaned back in her chair, her expression approving. Good. Now let's talk logistics. You need a place to live, something safe and close enough to monitor the situation, but far enough that Marcus doesn't know where you are. I have a property in the West End, fully furnished, paid for by the trust. You and the twins can stay there as long as you need. I can't afford. You can, Margaret interrupted. The trust has been generating income for 15 years. You have more money than you realize. Your father made sure of that. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I don't know how to thank you. Thank me by winning, Margaret said. Thank me by taking back what's yours and showing your children that dignity and patience are more powerful than cruelty and arrogance. She stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the city. Your father was one of the smartest men I ever met. He played the long game, and he played it perfectly. Now it's your turn. Clara stood, adjusted the twins, and joined Margaret at the window. Below, the city moved in its chaotic rhythm, people rushing to meetings and appointments, unaware of the quiet war being waged in offices and courtrooms. What do I do first? Clara asked. Margaret handed her a phone, sleek and new. This is a secure line. Only you and I have the number. Use it for everything related to the case. Second, you document everything. Every interaction with Marcus, every message, every attempt at contact. Third, you live your life. Find a routine. Take care of the twins. Let him think you've disappeared, that you've given up. And when he's convinced you're no longer a threat, we'll hit him with everything we have. Clara took the phone, felt its weight in her palm. He's going to be angry. Let him be angry, Margaret said. Angry men make mistakes. And we'll be there to document every single one. Clara looked at the twins, then back at Margaret. When this is over, what happens to Marcus? Margaret's expression didn't change. That depends on him. If he fights, we bury him. If he accepts the terms, he walks away with his freedom and nothing else. Either way, you win. Clara felt something shift inside her, something that had been broken 3 nights ago, but was slowly rebuilding itself into something harder, sharper, unbreakable. Then let's begin, she said. Margaret smiled. Welcome to the fight, Clara Ward. Your father would be proud. 3 weeks had passed since Clara walked out of Margaret's office with a plan and a purpose. 3 weeks of quiet mornings in the West End apartment, feeding the twins, documenting every message Marcus sent demanding she sign over custody rights, every voicemail from Vanessa mocking her for being too weak to fight back. 3 weeks of watching from a distance as Marcus threw parties at the mansion, posted photos on social media of his new life, his freedom, his triumph. But today, the waiting ended. Today, Clara would return to the mansion, not as a victim begging for shelter, but as the rightful owner armed with documents that would shatter everything Marcus thought he'd built. The Rolls-Royce pulled up to the apartment at exactly 9 in the morning, black and sleek, the kind of car that made people stop and stare. The driver, a man named James who'd worked for her father years ago, opened the door with a slight bow. "Miss Ward," he said, his voice respectful. "Are you ready?" Clara looked at herself in the mirror one last time. She wore a simple black dress, her hair pulled back, minimal makeup. She didn't need to look rich. She just needed to look certain. "I'm ready," she said. Margaret sat in the back seat, her briefcase open, files spread across her lap. "The officers will meet us there. We have the eviction notice, the deed transfer documents, and the cease and desist orders for all accounts and credit cards. The moment we arrive, everything Marcus has been using stops working. His cards will decline. His access to the business accounts will be frozen, and he'll have exactly 48 hours to vacate the property." Clara nodded, her hand steady even though her heart hammered in her chest. "What if he fights?" "He will fight," Margaret said. "Men like Marcus always fight. But that's what we want. Every word he says, every threat he makes, it all becomes evidence. The officers will document everything. The neighbors will see. And by tonight, this story will be all over the city." The Rolls-Royce glided through traffic, turning onto Riverside Drive where the mansion stood like a monument to lies. Clara saw the golden lights glowing in the windows, the perfectly manicured lawn, the fountain in the driveway that Marcus loved to show off in his social media posts. Her home, her father's gift, stolen and flaunted by a man who'd never earned a single brick of it. 2 police cars were already parked at the curb. Officers stood on the sidewalk, their presence drawing curious stares from neighbors who'd begun gathering on their porches and lawns. Clara saw Mrs. Patterson from 3 doors down, the woman who'd once told her at a charity event that she was lucky to have married so well. She saw Mr. Jennings, the retired banker who'd complimented Marcus on his business acumen. They were all watching now, their phones out, recording. "Showtime," Margaret said, gathering her files. James opened the door and Clara stepped out, her heels clicking against the pavement. The morning sun caught the Rolls-Royce, making it gleam like a declaration. She walked toward the mansion, Margaret beside her, the officers falling into step behind them. Every eye on the street followed her movement. The front door opened before they reached it. Marcus stood there, barefoot, wearing pajama pants and a t-shirt, his hair messy from sleep. His expression shifted from confusion to recognition to anger in the space of a heartbeat. "Clara." He looked at the officers, at Margaret, at the Rolls-Royce. "What the hell is this?" "Mr. Marcus Ward," one of the officers said, stepping forward. "I'm Officer Daniels. We're here to serve you with an eviction notice and several legal documents pertaining to property ownership and asset freezing. You need to accept these papers." Marcus laughed, the sound sharp and disbelieving. "Eviction? This is my house. I own this house." "Actually, you don't," Margaret said, her voice calm and professional. She handed him a folder. "Inside you'll find the original deed to this property, purchased in 2015 by the Ward Family Trust with Clara Ward listed as the sole beneficiary. You'll also find documentation showing that every dollar you've spent in the last 6 years came from accounts controlled by Clara's father, and now controlled by Clara herself. This house, the cars in the garage, the business you think you built, all of it belongs to her." Marcus stared at the folder like it was a snake, his face drained of color. "That's impossible. I signed papers. I have documents." "You have fake documents," Margaret said. "Documents her father created to make you feel secure while he monitored your every move. The real documents are here, notarized, legal, and binding. You have 48 hours to remove your personal belongings and vacate the premises." Any attempt to damage property or remove items not explicitly yours will result in criminal charges. Vanessa appeared behind Marcus, wearing one of Clara's old robes, her expression smug until she saw the officers. "What's going on?" "They're lying," Marcus said, his voice rising. "This is harassment. I'm calling my lawyer." "Please do," Margaret said. "Your lawyer will tell you the same thing I'm telling you. You have no legal claim to this property or any of the associated assets." Clara stepped forward, her voice quiet but clear enough for everyone on the street to hear. "You threw me out 3 weeks ago, Marcus. You told me I was dead weight. You put me and our newborn babies on the street in the middle of the night because you thought I had nothing, that I was nothing. But you were wrong." Marcus's eyes locked on hers, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw fear. "Clara, listen." "No," she said. "You listen. Every lie you told is documented. Every dollar you stole is accounted for. Every benefit you enjoyed while pretending to be someone you're not, it's all over. This house is mine. The business is mine. And you have 2 days to get out." Vanessa grabbed Marcus's arm. "She can't do this. Tell her she can't do this." "She already did," Margaret said. She handed another folder to Vanessa. "And Miss Chun, you'll find documents in there detailing your embezzlement from Ward Ventures. We have records of every fraudulent transaction, every falsified expense report, every account you thought you'd hidden. You have 2 options. Return the money and resign quietly, or face criminal charges. Your choice." Vanessa's face went white. The folder slipped from her hands and scattered papers across the marble floor. Marcus turned to the officers. "This is insane. You can't just believe whatever she says." Officer Danielle's expression didn't change. "Sir, we're not here to debate ownership. We're here to serve legal documents. If you have a dispute, you'll need to take it up in court. But until then, you need to comply with the eviction notice." The neighbors were closer now, their phones raised, recording every second. Clara could hear their whispers, the shock and fascination in their voices. She turned to face them, her voice carrying across the lawn. "For 6 years, I lived in this house as Marcus's wife. I gave him everything I had. And 3 weeks ago, he threw me and our 3-day-old twins into the rain because he thought I was powerless. But my father knew better. He prepared for this. He made sure that when the truth came out, there would be no doubt about who was really powerless." She turned back to Marcus, her eyes steady. "You wanted me gone because you thought I was in your way. But I was never in your way, Marcus. I was the foundation you built your lies on. And now that foundation is gone." Marcus's jaw clenched. "You're going to regret this." "No," Clara said. "You're going to regret underestimating me." Margaret handed final documents to the officer. "All accounts associated with Marcus Ward have been frozen as of 8 this morning. Credit cards, business accounts, personal holdings, all inaccessible. He has 2 days to arrange alternative living situations and transportation. After that, any attempt to return to this property will be treated as trespassing." Marcus stood there, the folder in his hands, the mansion behind him, the Rolls-Royce gleaming in his driveway, and for the first time in his life, he had nothing to say. Clara turned and walked back to the car, her head high, her steps measured. James opened the door and she slid inside. Margaret followed. The officers remained on the porch, ensuring Marcus understood the documents were binding. As the Rolls-Royce pulled away, Clara looked back at the mansion one last time. Marcus stood in the doorway, Vanessa beside him, both of them frozen in disbelief. The neighbors were already talking, their phones buzzing with messages and posts. By tonight, the whole city would know. The woman they'd pitted, the wife they'd dismissed, had just reclaimed everything. And she'd done it with patience, evidence, and the unshakable certainty that justice, when done right, didn't need to be loud. It just needed to be thorough. The mansion felt different now that it was truly hers. Clara walked through rooms she'd once cleaned and decorated. Rooms where she'd hosted dinners for Marcus's business partners while he took credit for her work. Rooms where she'd cried alone while he was out with Vanessa. But the tears were gone now, replaced by something colder and more precise. Margaret had been clear. Ownership was only the first step. to protect the twins, to secure their future. Clara needed to ensure Marcus could never use the legal system against her. That meant gathering evidence so thorough, so damning, that any judge would see him for what he truly was. He'll come after custody, Margaret had warned during their meeting that morning. Men like Marcus don't accept defeat. They reframe it. He'll claim you're unstable, that you manipulated your father, that the twins deserve a father with resources and stability. He'll make himself the victim. Clara had nodded, her mind already working. Then we need to show he's neither stable nor fit to be their father. Exactly, Margaret said. Which is why we're going to let him bury himself. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Marcus was arrogant, and arrogant men talked when they thought they were safe. Clara would arrange a private dinner, a supposed reconciliation attempt, and she'd let him think he'd won her back. Margaret's team had already installed recording equipment throughout the mansion, hidden cameras and microphones in every room Marcus was likely to use. Everything he said, every admission, every threat would be documented. "Are you sure you can do this?" Margaret had asked, her eyes searching Clara's face. Sitting across from him, pretending to be weak, letting him think he has power over you. Clara had met her gaze without flinching. "I've been doing it for 6 years. What's one more night?" Now, as she set the dining room table with the chin Marcus loved, the crystal glasses he'd always insisted on, she felt nothing but calm determination. The twins were with Mrs. Chun, safe and far away from whatever happened tonight. Clara had rehearsed her role, practiced the trembling voice, the apologetic tone, the desperate woman willing to do anything to keep her family together. It was a performance, and she intended to make it flawless. Marcus arrived at 7, exactly on time, wearing the suit she'd always said made him look powerful. He stood in the doorway, his expression guarded, calculating. "You said you wanted to talk." "I do," Clara said, her voice soft, uncertain. "Please come in." He walked past her, his eyes scanning the mansion like he was cataloging what he'd lost. "You've redecorated." "Something's needed to change," Clara said. She gestured to the dining room. "I made your favorite. Steak, medium rare, the way you like it." Marcus sat down slowly, suspicion written across his face. "What's this about, Clara? You humiliate me in front of the entire neighborhood. You take everything I work for. And now you want to have dinner." Clara sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap. "I want to talk about the twins. About us." "There is no us," Marcus said sharply. "You made that clear when you showed up with lawyers and cops." "I was angry," Clara said, letting her voice crack. "You hurt me, Marcus. You threw me out when I was at my weakest. But I've had time to think, and I realize fighting isn't good for anyone, especially not the babies." Marcus leaned back, his expression softening just slightly. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we can work something out," Clara said. "Maybe we don't have to be enemies. Maybe we can co-parent, find a way to make this work without dragging each other through court." She watched his eyes, saw the calculation happening behind them. He was trying to figure out her angle, trying to decide if she was genuine or if this was another trap. "Why this sudden change?" he asked. Clara looked down at her hands. "Because I'm tired, Marcus. I'm tired of being angry. I'm tired of fighting. And I don't want my children growing up thinking their parents hated each other." She let a tear slide down her cheek, perfectly timed, perfectly placed. "I just want peace." Marcus picked up his wine glass, swirled it, took a slow sip. "You know, Clara, I always thought you were smarter than you let on. All those years playing the dutiful wife. And now this. The mansion, the money, the power play. Your father taught you well." "My father wanted to protect me," Clara said quietly. "That's all he ever wanted." "Protect you," Marcus repeated, his tone mocking. "Is that what you call it? Setting up elaborate trusts, hiding assets, treating me like a criminal." Clara's pulse quickened, but her face remained calm. "You were the one who threw me out, Marcus. You were the one who chose Vanessa." Marcus laughed, the sound bitter. "Vanessa was a mistake. A distraction. But you, Clara, you were always the long game. I just didn't realize your father was playing a longer one." He leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "But here's what I don't understand. Why give me a chance now? You won. You took everything. Why not just finish me off? This was the moment. Clara let silence hang between them, heavy and deliberate. Then she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Because the twins deserve better than parents who destroy each other. And because despite everything, I don't want you to have nothing. Marcus studied her, and she could see him weighing her words, measuring her sincerity. Finally he smiled, the same smile he'd used when they first met, charming and dangerous. You know what I think, Clara? I think you're scared. I think you know that if I fight for custody, I could win. I have connections, resources, lawyers who eat people like Margaret Hale for breakfast. And I think you're here trying to negotiate before I destroy you in court. Clara's heart hammered, but her face showed only sadness. Maybe you're right. Maybe I am scared. But wouldn't it be easier for both of us if we just agreed? You get time with the twins, I keep the house, we split assets fairly. Split assets fairly, Marcus repeated, his smile widening. After your father stole everything from me? He didn't steal anything, Clara said. It was always mine. Was it? Marcus leaned closer, his voice dropping to something intimate and threatening. Or did he manipulate a dying old man's trust documents to make it look that way? Because I've got lawyers looking into that, Clara. And if we find any irregularities, any hint of fraud or elder abuse, this whole thing comes crashing down on you. Clara forced herself to look frightened. There was no fraud. We'll see, Marcus said. He picked up his fork, cut into the steak, and took a bite. This is good. You always were a decent cook. They ate in tense silence, Clara playing her part, Marcus growing more comfortable with each passing minute. By the time dessert arrived, he was talking freely, his guard lowered by wine and the belief that he'd regained the upper hand. You want to know the truth, Clara? I married you because I thought you were controllable, sweet, naive, desperate for love. I thought I could build my empire using your father's connections, and then discard you when I didn't need you anymore. And it almost worked. Clara kept her eyes down. Almost. The problem was your father, Marcus continued, his voice thick with wine and arrogance. He was smarter than he looked. All those years pretending to be some simple warehouse manager while he was hiding millions. I underestimated him. I won't make that mistake with you. Clara looked up, her eyes meeting his. What does that mean? Marcus smiled, and it was the coldest thing she'd ever seen. It means I'm going after full custody. Not because I want to raise those kids, but because they're leverage. You want them? You'll sign over half the trust, half the assets, half of everything. Otherwise, I'll drag you through court for years. I'll make you look unstable, unfit, dangerous. And by the time I'm done, you'll be lucky to get supervised visitation. Clara felt ice settle in her chest. There it was. The admission Margaret had said would come. The proof of his intentions, his manipulation, his complete disregard for his own children. You'd use your own babies as leverage? Clara whispered, letting shock color her voice. They're not babies, Clara. They're assets. Just like this house, just like the trust, just like everything else. Marcus stood, tossed his napkin on the table. Thank you for dinner. And for showing me exactly how desperate you are. My lawyers will be in touch. He walked toward the door, and Clara stood, her voice steady now, the performance over. Marcus. He turned. Yeah. You should know something, Clara said. Every word you just said was recorded. Every admission, every threat, every piece of evidence I needed to prove you're unfit to parent those twins. It's all documented. Marcus's face went slack. What? Clara walked to the sideboard, opened a drawer, and pulled out a small recording device. Audio and video. Everywhere in this house. Margaret warned me you'd do this. She said men like you always tell the truth when they think they've won. Marcus lunged toward her, but Clara stepped back, her phone already in her hand. I've already sent copies to Margaret, to the family court judge, and to my secure backup. You take one step closer, and I call the police. You threaten me again, and it becomes evidence of domestic intimidation. You try to fight for custody, and every judge in this city will see you admitting you don't want your children. You just want to use them as weapons. Marcus stood frozen, his face red with rage. You set me up. No, Clara said. I gave you a chance to be decent. You chose to be exactly who you've always been. And now everyone will know it. Marcus believed he still had cards to play. 3 days after the dinner disaster, after his lawyers told him the recordings were legally obtained and admissible in court, after Vanessa stopped answering his calls when she realized he was broke, he decided to throw a party. Not just any party, but a rooftop celebration at the Pinnacle Hotel, the kind of event where the city's elite gathered to see and be seen. He sent invitations to every business associate, every society figure, every person who'd ever mattered in his world. The message was clear. I'm still standing, I'm still powerful, and Clara Ward's little victory was just a temporary setback. Clara heard about the party from Margaret, who'd heard about it from 3 different sources within hours of the invitations going out. He's desperate, Margaret said over the phone. Desperate men do stupid things. Should we be worried? Clara asked. She was in the nursery, watching the twins sleep, their tiny hands curled into fists. Worried? No, Margaret said. Prepared? Yes. I've already sent our team. Undercover, of course. Photographers, journalists, even a few strategically placed guests who owe me favors. Whatever happens tonight, we'll document it. And if Marcus does what I think he'll do, he'll hand us the final nail for his coffin. Clara felt a flicker of something dark and satisfied. What do you think he'll do? He'll brag, Margaret said simply. He'll drink too much, surround himself with people who'll tell him what he wants to hear, and he'll talk. About you, about the twins, about his plans. And we'll record every word. The Pinnacle's rooftop was decorated like something out of a magazine, white lights strung between glass pillars, champagne towers glowing under the city skyline. Marcus stood at the center of it all, wearing a tuxedo he'd rented on credit, smiling like he owned the world instead of owing it. Vanessa was conspicuously absent. The guests who'd bothered to show up, and there were fewer than he'd hoped, mingled with polite distance, their conversations careful, their eyes curious. Everyone had heard the rumors. Everyone knew something had happened with his wife, his house, his business. But no one knew the full story, and Marcus intended to control the narrative. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus called out, raising his glass. The crowd quieted, turning toward him with expressions ranging from interested to skeptical. Thank you for coming tonight. I know there's been talk, speculation about my personal life, my business, my marriage. And I want to set the record straight. He took a long sip of champagne, his smile widening. My wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, Clara Ward, has been spreading lies about me. She's used her father's money and influence to try to destroy everything I built. But here's what she doesn't understand. I built my company with my own hands, my own intelligence, my own vision. And no amount of legal manipulation will change that. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others exchanging glances. In the back corner, partially hidden behind a decorative column, stood a woman named Rachel Chun, one of Margaret's most trusted investigators. She held her phone at waist level, camera recording, capturing every word, every gesture. Beside her, a young journalist named David Kim adjusted his position to get a better angle. Marcus continued, his voice growing louder, more confident. Clara thinks she can use our children as leverage. Twin babies, born just weeks ago, and she's already weaponizing them. She's keeping them from me, denying me access, trying to paint me as an unfit father. But let me tell you something. He paused for effect. I don't need those kids to prove who I am. I am Marcus Ward. I built Ward Ventures from nothing. I made myself into someone this city respects. And if Clara thinks she can take that from me, she's more deluded than I thought. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. James Harrington, a venture capitalist who'd known Clara's father, frowned and set down his glass. Marcus, he called out, isn't it true that Ward Ventures was primarily funded by external investors? Marcus waved the question away. Initial seed funding, sure. But the vision, the execution, the success, that was all me. And isn't it also true, James continued, his voice steady, that those external investors were actually controlled by Clara's father through offshore accounts? Marcus's smile faltered. That's a mischaracterization. Is it? James pressed. Because I've seen the documents. Samuel Ward was a client of mine for 15 years. I know exactly how he structured his holdings. And I know he never trusted you. The rooftop went silent. Marcus's face flushed red. You don't know what you're talking about. I know that Samuel called me 2 weeks before he died, James said quietly. He told me he was worried about his daughter's marriage. He asked me to be a witness for some documents he was signing. Documents that protected Clara in case you ever showed your true colors. And from where I'm standing, Marcus, it looks like he was right to worry. Marcus slammed his glass down on the nearest table. Get out. This is my party. Get out. James smiled, a thin, knowing smile. Actually, it's the hotel's party. You're just renting the space. And given that your credit card was declined when you tried to pay the deposit, I'd say the hotel might have some questions about tonight's bill. The murmurs grew louder. Guests pulled out their phones, some texting, others already posting. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. That's a lie. My accounts are temporarily frozen because of legal complications, but I have resources. I have power. You have nothing, came a voice from the crowd. Vanessa stepped forward, and for a moment Marcus's face lit with relief. But her expression was cold, her eyes hard. Vanessa, tell them the truth. The truth. Vanessa laughed. The truth is you're broke, Marcus. The truth is every account you bragged about, every investment you claimed was yours, it all belonged to Clara. You were living off her father's money for 6 years, and you were too arrogant to realize it. Marcus lunged toward her, but security stepped between them. You knew, Marcus hissed. You knew the whole time. Of course I knew, Vanessa said. Why do you think I stuck around? I was skimming from the accounts you thought you controlled. Small amounts at first, then bigger. You never noticed because you were too busy playing the big man. But now that the money's gone, so am I. She turned to the crowd. And for anyone wondering, Clara Ward has evidence of everything. Every fraud, every lie, every crime Marcus committed thinking he was untouchable. She's been building a case for weeks. And when it goes public, all of you standing here will be questioned about what you knew and when you knew it. The rooftop emptied faster than it had filled. Guests grabbed their coats, called their drivers, disappeared into elevators without looking back. Within minutes, only Marcus remained, standing alone under the white lights, his tuxedo suddenly looking cheap, his smile gone, his hand shaking. Rachel Chun stepped out from behind the column, her phone still recording. Mr. Ward, would you like to make a statement for the record? Marcus looked at her, his eyes wild. Who are you? I work for Margaret Hale, Rachel said calmly. And I've recorded everything that happened here tonight. Your threats toward your wife, your admission that you don't value your children, Vanessa's confirmation of fraud. It's all documented. Do you have anything you'd like to add? Marcus's voice came out strangled. This is entrapment. No, Rachel said. This is justice. You threw a public party and made public statements. Nothing about tonight was private or protected. And now every major news outlet in the city has footage of you melting down in front of the people you tried to impress. She lowered her phone. Clara Ward sends her regards. Marcus sank into a chair, his head in his hands. The city spread out before him, lights twinkling in the darkness, indifferent to his collapse. He thought he could rebuild his reputation, reclaim his power, and prove that Clara's victory was temporary. Instead, he'd done exactly what she predicted. He destroyed himself in front of witnesses, creating evidence so damning that no lawyer could spin it. No judge could ignore it. On the other side of the city, in the mansion that was rightfully hers, Clara sat in the nursery watching the twins sleep. Her phone buzzed with a message for Margaret. It's done. He confessed everything in front of 40 witnesses. We have him. Clara set the phone down and picked up one of the twins, holding her daughter close. Your father just lost, she whispered. Not because I destroyed him, but because he destroyed himself. And you'll grow up knowing that dignity and patience always win in the end. Outside, the night was quiet, the city settling into sleep. But in courtrooms and law offices across town, documents were being prepared, evidence was being compiled, and the final act of Marcus Ward's downfall was being carefully, methodically arranged. Clara had waited, watched, and struck only when the moment was perfect. And now, with Marcus's own words sealing his fate, she could finally rest knowing her children were safe, her legacy was secure, and justice had been served exactly as her father had planned. The courtroom smelled like old wood and tension. Every seat filled with observers who'd read the headlines, watched the videos, and wanted to see how the story ended. Clara sat at the plaintiff's table, the twins in a double stroller beside her, sleeping peacefully despite the weight of the moment. She wore a navy dress, simple and dignified, her hair pulled back, no jewelry except her mother's pearl earrings. Margaret sat to her left, 3 assistants behind them with boxes of evidence stacked like a fortress. Across the aisle, Marcus sat alone. His lawyer, a tired-looking man named Gerald Porter, who'd taken the case out of obligation rather than belief, shuffled papers with the energy of someone already defeated. Vanessa was nowhere to be seen. She'd taken a plea deal 2 days earlier, agreeing to testify against Marcus in exchange for reduced charges on her embezzlement. The gallery whispered, phones were silenced, and Judge Patricia Monroe entered with the kind of presence that made the room go still. "All rise," the bailiff called. Everyone stood. Judge Monroe, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that had seen every lie a courtroom could produce, took her seat and surveyed the room. "Be seated." She opened the file in front of her, scanning the documents with an expression that revealed nothing. "We're here for the matter of Ward versus Ward, custody determination and asset distribution. I've reviewed the preliminary filings, and I'll say this up front. I don't like my time wasted. Both parties will present their cases clearly and concisely. Ms. Hale, you may begin." Margaret stood, her movements precise and controlled. "Your Honor, this case is about protection. Protection of 2 innocent children from a father who has repeatedly demonstrated that he views them not as human beings, but as leverage. Protection of assets that were always legally Clara Ward's, but were systematically exploited by Marcus Ward through fraud, manipulation, and betrayal." She gestured to the assistants, who began distributing folders to the judge and the court clerk. "In these folders you'll find comprehensive documentation. Trust deeds dating back 15 years showing Clara as the sole beneficiary. Financial records proving every dollar Marcus spent came from accounts controlled by Clara's late father. Recordings of Marcus explicitly stating he plans to use the children as bargaining chips. And witness testimony from over 20 individuals confirming a pattern of deception and emotional abuse." Judge Monroe flipped through the documents, her expression unchanging. Marcus leaned over to whisper to his lawyer, but Porter just shook his head. Margaret continued. "Clara Ward was thrown out of her own home at midnight, 3 days after giving birth via C-section, with newborn twins in her arms and nowhere to go. Marcus Ward orchestrated this expulsion, believing she had no resources, no power, and no recourse. He was wrong on all counts. What he didn't know was that Clara's father, Samuel Ward, had spent years preparing for exactly this scenario. She walked toward the evidence table, picking up a sealed envelope. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence a video recording made by Samuel Ward 6 months before his death. In it, he explicitly outlines his concerns about Marcus's character, his reasons for establishing the trust, and his instructions for Clara should she ever need protection." Judge Monroe nodded. "Play it." The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as a screen descended. Samuel Ward's face appeared, older and thinner than Clara remembered, but his voice was strong and clear. "My name is Samuel Ward. I'm recording this on March 15th, 2017, in the presence of my attorney Margaret Hale and witness James Harrington. If this video is being played, it means my daughter Clara has been betrayed by her husband Marcus Ward, and it means the protections I've put in place are now active." The courtroom was silent except for Samuel's voice. Clara felt tears prick her eyes, but kept her gaze steady. "I established the Ward Family Trust in 2010 when Clara first introduced me to Marcus. I didn't trust him then, And everything I've observed since has confirmed my suspicions. He married my daughter for access, for the appearance of legitimacy, and for the financial benefits he assumed came with our family. What he doesn't know is that I spent 30 years in asset protection, hiding and securing wealth for clients who needed discretion. I used those same skills to protect Clara. Samuel's image leaned forward, his expression intense. The mansion on Riverside Drive is held in trust for Clara, purchased through shell companies Marcus will never trace. Every investment he thinks he made with his own money was actually funded by accounts I controlled. I've documented every transaction, every lie, every moment of manipulation. And I've instructed Margaret to release this information only when Clara is safe and ready to reclaim what's hers. The video ended. The lights came up. Judge Monroe's expression had shifted from neutral to something harder, more focused. Mr. Porter, does your client wish to dispute any of the documentation provided? Gerald Porter stood slowly. Your Honor, my client maintains that he acted in good faith throughout his marriage, that he was unaware of the extent of Samuel Ward's financial involvement, and that his primary concern is the welfare of his children. Is that so? Judge Monroe's tone was dry. She looked directly at Marcus. Mr. Ward, stand up. Marcus stood, his face pale. Mr. Ward, I've reviewed the recordings submitted by Ms. Hale's team. Recordings where you explicitly state, and I quote, I don't need those kids to prove who I am, and they're not babies, they're assets. Do you deny making those statements? Marcus's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Answer the question, Judge Monroe said sharply. I was angry, Marcus finally managed. I said things I didn't mean. You said them multiple times in multiple contexts to multiple people, Judge Monroe said. You said them at a private dinner with your wife, at a public party in front of 40 witnesses, and in text messages to associates that have been submitted as evidence. These aren't heat-of-the-moment slips. These are consistent expressions of your true feelings toward your children. She flipped through more documents. I also have testimony from household staff, neighbors, and business associates describing a pattern of emotional abuse toward Clara Ward. Belittling her in public, controlling her finances, isolating her from friends and family. Mr. Ward, you present yourself as a victim of legal maneuvering, but the evidence shows you as a manipulator who got caught. Marcus tried to speak, but Judge Monroe raised her hand. I'm not finished. What disturbs me most about this case is your complete lack of remorse. Even now, standing in my courtroom with overwhelming evidence of your misconduct, you maintain that you're the wrong party. That tells me everything I need to know about your character and your fitness as a parent. She turned to Clara. Ms. Ward, please stand. Clara stood, her legs steady despite the emotion coursing through her. You've been through an ordeal that would break most people, Judge Monroe said, her voice softer now. You were betrayed by someone you trusted, expelled from your home while recovering from childbirth, and forced to rebuild your life with 2 newborns depending on you. Yet you did so with dignity, patience, and respect for the legal process. That speaks to your character. Judge Monroe looked down at her notes. I'm ruling as follows. Primary physical and legal custody of the minor children is awarded to Clara Ward. Marcus Ward is granted supervised visitation every other weekend, contingent on completion of a parenting course and anger management therapy. All assets currently held in the Ward Family Trust remain under Clara's control, as they were always legally hers. Marcus Ward is ordered to vacate the Riverside property within 7 days and is prohibited from contacting Clara except through legal counsel regarding matters of the children. The gavel came down, the sound sharp and final. Marcus sank into his chair, his face in his hands. Gerald Porter gathered his papers with the resigned efficiency of a man who'd known this outcome was inevitable. Margaret leaned over to Clara. It's done. You won. But Clara didn't feel triumphant. She felt tired and relieved and sad for what could have been if Marcus had been different, if he'd been the man she believed him to be. The twins stirred in their stroller, one of them making a soft sound. Clara bent down, adjusted their blankets, and whispered, You're safe now. Mama made sure you're safe. The courtroom began to empty. Observers filing out to call their friends, update their social media, and spread the news that Clara Ward had won everything. James Harrington approached, his expression kind. "Samuel would be proud of you." "Thank you," Clara said, "for being there when he needed a witness, for believing him." "He was one of the smartest men I ever knew," James said. "And you're just like him. Patient, strategic, unshakable when it matters." Marcus stood, his lawyer guiding him toward the exit. He paused at Clara's table, his eyes meeting hers. For a moment she thought he might apologize, might show some glimmer of the man she'd once loved. But his expression hardened. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Clara said quietly. The judge ruled. "The evidence is public. You have no leverage, no power, and no claim to anything I have. It's over, Marcus. And the only question now is whether you accept that with dignity or destroy what little reputation you have left." He stared at her, and she saw the moment he realized she was right. The fight went out of his shoulders. He turned and walked away without another word. Margaret began packing the evidence boxes, her team moving with practiced efficiency. "What happens now?" Clara asked. "Now you go home," Margaret said. "You raise your children. You restore your father's foundation. You live the life you were always meant to live, free from manipulation and fear." Clara picked up her purse, checked the twins one more time, and walked toward the courtroom doors. The hallway beyond was filled with cameras and reporters, all wanting statements, reactions, details. But Margaret's security team formed a corridor, guiding Clara through without stopping. "Ms. Ward, how do you feel about the ruling?" one reporter called. Clara paused, just for a moment, and looked back at the crowd. "I feel like justice was done. Not just for me, but for my children. And I hope anyone watching this who's been told they're powerless, who's been made to feel small, understands that patience and truth always win in the end." She walked out into the sunlight, the twins secured beside her, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to smile. The courtroom reckoning was over. Her father's plan had worked. And now, finally, she could begin the life he'd protected for her, the life she'd earned through strength, strategy, and unshakable dignity. 3 weeks after the courtroom victory, Clara thought the war was over. She'd settled into a rhythm with the twins, morning feedings and afternoon walks through the neighborhood where people no longer whispered, but smiled with respect. The mansion had been restored, room by room, each space reclaimed and reimagined as something that belonged to her and her children, not to the ghosts of Marcus's manipulation. Margaret had assured her the custody arrangement was ironclad, that Marcus's supervised visitation was the most he'd ever get, that she could finally breathe. But Clara had learned that men like Marcus didn't accept defeat quietly. They waited, regrouped, and struck when you thought you were safe. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by courier with Marcus's lawyer's firm embossed on the envelope. Clara's hands trembled as she opened it, already knowing it wouldn't be good news. Inside was a motion for emergency custody modification, 40 pages of legal arguments claiming that Clara was an unfit mother, that she'd manipulated the court system using her father's wealth, that the twins deserved a stable two-parent home, and that Marcus had undergone significant personal growth in the weeks since the ruling. "He's claiming family unity," Clara said into the phone, her voice tight. Margaret was silent for 3 seconds too long. "What does that mean?" Clara pressed. "What aren't you telling me?" "It means he's found a new angle," Margaret said carefully. "He's not arguing that you're a bad mother. He's arguing that splitting custody is harmful to the children, that they need both parents equally involved, and that the only way to achieve that is full joint custody with him having primary physical placement." Clara felt ice settle in her stomach. But the judge already ruled. He lost. Judges can be petitioned for modifications if circumstances change or if new evidence emerges, Margaret explained. Marcus is claiming he's completed therapy, that he's addressed his anger issues, and that he now understands the importance of fatherhood. He's presenting himself as reformed. "That's a lie," Clara said. 3 weeks ago, he called the twins assets. Now he's father of the year. "I know," Margaret said, "and we'll prove it's a lie. But Clara, there's something else in this motion. Something that concerns me." Clara's grip tightened on the phone. "What?" He's requesting a full audit of the Ward family trust. He's claiming your father's assets were obtained through illegal means, that the trust itself might be fraudulent, and that any custody arrangement should account for the possibility that your financial situation is built on criminal activity. Clara sat down hard, the letter falling from her hands. That's insane. My father was an asset manager. Everything he did was legal. I know that, you know that. But Marcus is betting on creating enough doubt to force a settlement, Margaret said. He's not trying to win. He's trying to make you so afraid of public scrutiny, of having your father's reputation dragged through the mud, that you'll give him what he wants just to make it stop. What does he want? Clara asked, though she already knew. Money, Margaret said flatly. He wants a percentage of the trust, ongoing support payments, and shared custody so he can claim parental rights to anything you build for the children. This isn't about the twins, Clara. This is about him trying to reclaim power over you by targeting your inheritance. Clara felt rage bloom hot and sharp in her chest. When is the hearing? 2 weeks. And Clara, you need to prepare yourself. He's going to be convincing. He's going to play the victim, the reformed father, the man who lost everything because of legal technicalities. The judge might be sympathetic. Judge Monroe saw through him once, Clara said. She'll see through him again. We're not getting Judge Monroe, Margaret said. Marcus's lawyer filed for a change of venue, claiming bias. We got Judge Robert Carlson. He's older, traditional, and he has a reputation for believing in family reconciliation at all costs. Clara closed her eyes, her mind racing. Then we give him evidence he can't ignore. We show him exactly who Marcus is and what he's really after. 2 weeks passed like a countdown. Clara spent every day preparing, reviewing documents with Margaret, rehearsing answers to questions she knew Marcus's lawyer would ask. She documented every supervised visitation, noting that Marcus showed up late 3 times, left early twice, and spent most of his time on his phone rather than engaging with the twins. She gathered character references from neighbors, from Mrs. Chun, from the staff who'd worked in the mansion during her marriage and witnessed Marcus's treatment of her. She even reached out to Vanessa's lawyer and secured a sworn statement detailing Marcus's conversations about using the children as leverage. On the morning of the hearing, Clara dressed in gray, professional and understated, and arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes early. The twins were with Mrs. Chun, safely away from whatever happened today. Margaret met her at the entrance, her expression grim but determined. He's already inside. And Clara, I need to warn you. He brought reinforcements. Inside the courtroom, Marcus sat with 3 people Clara didn't recognize. An older couple in expensive clothes who radiated disapproval, and a younger woman in a conservative suit holding a briefcase. Who are they? Clara whispered. The couple are his parents, Margaret said. They've been estranged from Marcus for 5 years, but apparently they've reconciled. The woman is Dr. Ellen Hayes, a child psychologist he's hired to testify that the twins need a father figure. They're 4 months old, Clara hissed. They need food, sleep, and love. They don't need a father who sees them as bargaining chips. I know, Margaret said, but we need to stay calm. Let him make his case, let him expose himself, and then we dismantle it piece by piece. Judge Carlson entered, a man in his late 60s with white hair and a stern expression that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. This is a motion for custody modification in the matter of Ward versus Ward. Mr. Porter, you may present your case. Gerald Porter stood, looking more energized than he had during the original trial. Your Honor, my client Marcus Ward comes before you today not as the man he was, but as the man he's become. In the weeks since the original custody ruling, Mr. Ward has completed an intensive therapy program, reconciled with his family, and gained a deep understanding of his failures as a husband and father. He's not here to take the children away from their mother. He's here to ensure they have the benefit of both parents, equally and consistently. He gestured to Marcus, who stood and approached the witness stand. Marcus looked different, Clara noticed with a chill. His hair was cut shorter. His suit was modest instead of flashy, and his expression was one of humble contrition. This was a performance, carefully crafted and perfectly executed. Mr. Ward, Porter began. Can you tell the court what you've learned in the past month? Marcus nodded, his voice soft and measured. I've learned that I was selfish, that I prioritized my career and my ego over my family, that I hurt the woman I married and failed the children I brought into this world. I'm not asking the court to forgive me. I'm asking for the chance to be the father my children deserve. Judge Carlson leaned forward. You've completed therapy? Yes, Your Honor. 12 intensive sessions with Dr. Patricia Monroe, no relation to the previous judge, focusing on anger management, communication, and parenting skills. Porter handed documents to the clerk. We have Dr. Monroe's full report, confirming Mr. Ward's progress and recommending increased parental involvement. Margaret stood. Your Honor, if I may, Dr. Monroe's report is based on 12 sessions over 3 weeks. That's barely enough time to address surface behaviors, let alone deep-seated character issues. Judge Carlson frowned. Ms. Hale, you'll have your chance to cross-examine. Mr. Porter, continue. Porter called Dr. Hayes to the stand. The child psychologist spoke about the importance of father figures, about studies showing better outcomes for children with active paternal involvement, about the psychological harm of parental alienation. It was all general, all theoretical, nothing specific to the twins or to Marcus's actual behavior. But it sounded convincing, especially delivered in Dr. Hayes's calm, professional tone. Then it was Margaret's turn. She stood, walked to the witness stand, and fixed Dr. Hayes with a level stare. Dr. Hayes, have you met the Ward twins? No, I have not. Have you interviewed Clara Ward? No. Have you reviewed any of the evidence from the original custody hearing, including recordings of Marcus Ward explicitly stating he views his children as assets rather than human beings? Dr. Hayes hesitated. I was provided with limited background information. Limited, Margaret repeated. So your testimony is based entirely on general principles rather than the specific circumstances of this case? I was hired to provide expert context, Dr. Hayes said, her tone defensive. Context, Margaret said. Not evidence. Not observation. Just theory. Thank you, doctor. No further questions. Margaret called her own witnesses. Mrs. Chun, who described Clara's devotion to the twins and Marcus's sporadic, disengaged visits. James Harrington, who testified about Samuel Ward's legitimate career and the legal structure of the trust. And finally, a recording expert who authenticated the dinner conversation where Marcus admitted his true intentions. The courtroom listened in silence as Marcus's voice filled the space. They're not babies, Clara. They're assets. Just like this house, just like the trust, just like everything else. Judge Carlson's expression darkened. He looked at Marcus. Mr. Ward, this recording is dated 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks after you claim to have begun your transformation. How do you explain threatening to use your children as leverage while simultaneously completing therapy? Marcus's carefully constructed mask cracked. I was angry. Clara had taken everything from me. I wasn't thinking clearly. You seem to have a pattern of not thinking clearly when you're angry, Judge Carlson said. A pattern that concerns me greatly when considering the welfare of 2 infant children. He reviewed his notes, the courtroom holding its breath. Mr. Ward, I've listened to your testimony and reviewed your documentation. I've also listened to evidence that directly contradicts your claims of personal growth. 12 therapy sessions don't erase 6 years of documented manipulation and emotional abuse. And they certainly don't excuse threatening to exploit your own children for financial gain mere weeks ago. He turned to Clara. Ms. Ward, the original custody arrangement stands. Primary physical and legal custody remains with you. Mr. Ward's visitation will continue to be supervised, and any future motions for modification will require substantial evidence of sustained behavioral change over a minimum of 1 year. The gavel came down. Marcus's parents stood abruptly and left without looking at their son. Dr. Hayes gathered her briefcase and departed with professional detachment. Marcus sat alone, his performance shattered, his final attempt at manipulation exposed and rejected. Clara felt something release in her chest, a tension she'd been carrying since the letter arrived. Margaret touched her arm. It's over. For real this time. Clara nodded, but she didn't smile. She was tired of fighting, tired of having to prove her worth and her rights over and over again. She just wanted to go home, hold her children, and live the life her father had protected for her. He'll try again, Clara said quietly. No, Margaret said. He won't. Because now he knows we'll always be ready, always have evidence, always be one step ahead. And eventually, even Marcus Ward will understand that some battles can't be won. The courthouse steps felt different this time. Clara descended slowly, deliberately, the afternoon sun catching the edges of her gray suit as reporters clustered at the bottom. Cameras already rolling. She hadn't called them. They'd come on their own, drawn by whispers of the custody battle, by rumors of Marcus Ward's spectacular courtroom collapse, by the growing legend of the woman who'd been thrown out at midnight and returned in a Rolls-Royce. Margaret walked beside her, briefcase in hand, but Clara was the one they wanted. A young reporter pushed forward first, microphone extended. Ms. Ward, how does it feel to win custody again after your ex-husband's allegations? Clara paused and met the camera directly. It feels like justice. Not revenge. Justice. Her voice carried across the steps, clear and unwavering. My father taught me that dignity isn't given, it's maintained. Even when someone tries to strip it away, even when you're standing in the rain with nowhere to go, you maintain it. And eventually, the truth catches up. Another reporter called out. What would you say to other women facing similar situations? Women being manipulated or controlled by their partners? Clara's expression softened slightly. I'd say document everything. Stay quiet when you need to. Build your case. Don't let anger make you reckless. Because the system rewards preparation, not emotion. And most importantly, know your worth isn't determined by someone else's perception of you. She glanced back at the courthouse. I was thrown out like garbage. For months later, I owned everything he thought was his. That's not luck. That's a strategy meeting opportunity. The cameras loved it. By evening, clips of her statement had spread across local news stations, then social media, then beyond. Women in their 60s and 70s shared the videos with captions like this is what strength looks like. And she waited, she planned, she won. Clara's phone buzzed constantly with messages from people she hadn't heard from in years, some offering support, others admitting they'd doubted her story until now. Mrs. Chin called that night, voice bright with pride. You are on the 6 o'clock news. Everyone in my building is talking about you. They're saying you're a hero. Clara smiled tiredly, the twins finally asleep after a long day. I'm not a hero, Mrs. Chun. I'm just a mother who refused to let someone exploit her children. That's exactly what makes you a hero, Mrs. Chun said firmly. How many women stay silent because they're scared? How many let men like Marcus win because fighting seems too hard? You didn't. And now they're all watching, learning that it's possible to fight back and win. The next morning, Clara received an unexpected call. Ms. Ward, this is Patricia Gonzalez from the Women's Empowerment Coalition. We've been following your case, and we'd like to invite you to speak at our annual gala next month. We think your story could inspire hundreds of women who are currently trapped in situations similar to what you escaped. Clara hesitated. Public speaking had never been her strength, and the thought of standing on a stage recounting her humiliation made her stomach tighten. But then she thought about the messages she'd received, about the women who'd written to say her courthouse statement had given them courage to leave their own abusive situations. What would you want me to talk about? Your journey, Patricia said. From the night you were expelled to the courtroom victory. The strategy, the patience, the rebuilding. We don't want a victim story. We want a survivor's blueprint. Clara looked at the twins sleeping in their crib, at the mansion her father had protected, at the life she'd reclaimed through careful planning and unwavering resolve. I'll do it. The weeks before the gala passed in a blur of preparation. Clara worked with Margaret to identify which details were legally safe to share, which moments would resonate most powerfully. She practiced her speech in front of Mrs. Chun, who cried twice and insisted Clara add more about the twins. People need to understand you weren't just fighting for yourself, Mrs. Chun said. You were fighting for them. That's what makes it so powerful. Meanwhile, Marcus's world continued its collapse. His parents, who'd briefly reconciled with him for the custody hearing, had returned to their estrangement after Judge Carlson's ruling. His business partnerships dissolved as news of his behavior spread through professional circles. Vanessa had left him weeks ago, taking half the remaining assets in their settlement. He'd become exactly what Clara had predicted, a cautionary tale, a man whose arrogance and cruelty had isolated him completely. Clara felt no satisfaction in his downfall. She simply felt free. The gala took place at the Riverside Hotel, a sprawling venue with crystal chandeliers and a ballroom that seated 400. Clara arrived early, the twins with Mrs. Chun back at the mansion, and stood backstage listening to the crowd gather. Patricia found her there, smiling reassuringly. "You're going to be amazing. Just speak from the heart. They're already on your side." The introduction was brief. Tonight we have the privilege of hearing from a woman whose story has captivated our city and inspired countless others. She's a mother, a strategist, and a testament to the power of patience and preparation. Please welcome Clara Ward. The applause was immediate and thunderous. Clara walked onto the stage, the spotlight warm on her face, and looked out at the sea of women filling the ballroom. Most were her age or older, faces marked by their own struggles and victories. She saw herself reflected in them, and understood that her story wasn't just hers anymore. "For months ago," she began, her voice steady, "I stood in the rain at midnight barefoot, holding my newborn twins, with nowhere to go. My husband had thrown me out of the house I thought was ours, replaced me with his mistress, and told me I was dead weight. At that moment, I had two choices, collapse or survive. I chose survival." She told them about her father's message, about the trust he'd secretly built to protect her. She described the quiet months of rebuilding, of gathering evidence, while Marcus celebrated his perceived victory. She explained the Rolls-Royce arrival, the courtroom confrontations, the custody battle where Marcus tried one final time to exploit her through their children. "But here's what I learned," Clara said, her voice rising with conviction. "Humiliation is temporary. Dignity is permanent. When someone tries to destroy you, they're betting you'll stay destroyed. They're counting on you being too tired, too scared, too broken to fight back. And the moment you prove them wrong, the moment you stand up with evidence and strategy and unshakable resolve, they have nothing left." The ballroom was silent, every woman leaning forward. So if you're in that rain right now, if you're holding your children and wondering how you'll survive tomorrow, I want you to know something. Clara's eyes swept across the crowd. Document everything. Stay quiet when you need to. Build your case brick by brick. And when the moment comes, when you're finally ready to reclaim what's yours, do it with such precision that they never see it coming. The applause started slowly, then built into a standing ovation that lasted 3 full minutes. Women approached her afterward, some crying, others simply wanting to shake her hand. One elderly woman, probably 75, gripped Clara's arm with surprising strength. "My granddaughter is in a situation like yours. I'm sending her your speech. You just saved her life." Clara drove home that night feeling something she hadn't felt since before her marriage. Purpose beyond survival. The mansion lights glowed warm as she pulled into the driveway. Mrs. Chun met her at the door, beaming. The twins were perfect. "And Clara, you have 17 messages from women's organizations asking you to speak. You're becoming a movement." Clara picked up her sleeping daughter, feeling the weight of her, the solid reality of what she protected. "I'm not a movement, Mrs. Chun. I'm just a mother who refused to let her children be used as weapons." "That's exactly what the movement needs," Mrs. Chun said softly. The city had watched Clara fall. Now they were watching her rise. And in living rooms across 3 countries, women her mother's age were taking notes, remembering their own battles and whispering to themselves, "If she could do it, maybe I can too." 6 months after the gala, Clara stood in her father's study, the room she'd avoided since reclaiming the mansion. Dust had settled on the mahogany desk, on the leather chair where Samuel Ward had spent countless nights managing fortunes and planning protections his daughter hadn't known she'd need. She'd finally found the courage to enter, to sit in his chair, to open the final drawer he'd mentioned in his video message. Inside was a single envelope, her name written in his careful handwriting. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Clara, if you're reading this, it means you've won. Not just the legal battles, not just the custody fight, but the war for your dignity and your children's future. I'm proud of you. I always knew you had the strength, even when you doubted it yourself. Now it's time to build something that outlasts both of us. The foundation documents are in the safe. The password is your mother's birthday. Use the trust not just to protect yourself, but to protect others. That's how we turn pain into purpose. That's how we make suffering mean something. Love always, Dad. Clara wiped her eyes, pulled herself together, and opened the safe. Inside were incorporation documents for the Ward Foundation for Women's Empowerment, already filed, already funded with $10 million from her father's estate. He'd planned this years ago, anticipated not just her need for protection, but her eventual desire to help others. She called Margaret immediately. Did you know about this? Your father mentioned it once, Margaret said carefully. He told me that if you survived what he feared was coming, you'd want to do more than just survive. He said you'd want to fight for others too. Was he right? Clara looked at the twins playing on the carpet, now 8 months old, babbling to each other in their private language. Yes, he was right. How do we start? Within 3 months, the Ward Foundation opened its doors in a renovated building downtown. The mission was simple: provide legal assistance, temporary housing, and financial support to women escaping abusive relationships or facing exploitation through their children. Clara hired a small staff, including a young lawyer named Jessica Chun, Mrs. Chen's niece, who'd survived her own custody battle and understood the system's cruelties intimately. The foundation's first client was a woman named Diane, 32, thrown out by her husband after she'd discovered his affair. I have 2 kids, Diane said during their initial meeting, her voice shaking. He's threatening to take them if I don't sign over my inheritance for my mother. He says he'll prove I'm unstable, that I'm a bad mother. I don't know what to do. Clara leaned forward, her expression calm but fierce. You document everything. Every threat, every message, every interaction. You don't engage emotionally. You engage strategically. And you never, ever let him use your children as leverage. We're going to help you, Diane. And when we're done, he's going to understand that underestimating you was the biggest mistake of his life. Over the next year, the foundation assisted 47 women. Some cases were resolved quietly through negotiated settlements. Others required courtroom battles where Clara occasionally testified as an expert witness on manipulation tactics and financial exploitation. Each victory felt personal. Each woman who walked away with her children and her dignity intact felt like validation of every moment Clara had suffered. The foundation's work attracted media attention, then national recognition. Clara was invited to speak at conferences, to consult on policy proposals, to meet with legislators about strengthening protections for mothers in custody disputes. She accepted selectively, always prioritizing the twins, always remembering that her father's legacy was meant to protect, not to feed her ego. One afternoon, Marcus appeared at the foundation's office. Security called Clara immediately. Ms. Ward, your ex-husband is here. He's asking to see you. Should we remove him? Clara's first instinct was refusal, but curiosity won. Send him to the conference room. I'll be there in 5 minutes. She brought Jessica with her, both for legal protection and moral support. Marcus sat at the table looking diminished, his expensive suit hanging loose on a frame that had lost weight and confidence. His face was drawn, his eyes tired. "Thank you for seeing me," he said quietly. Clara didn't respond, just watched him with the steady gaze she'd perfected in courtroom confrontations. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not here to cause problems. I'm here to apologize." "Apologize," Clara repeated, her tone neutral. "After everything you've done, you think an apology matters now?" "No," Marcus admitted. "I don't think it matters. But I owe you one anyway. I was cruel, manipulative, and I treated you like an object instead of a person. I used our children as weapons. I tried to destroy you because I couldn't control you. And I'm sorry." He paused, seeming to gather courage. "I'm also here to sign away my parental rights. I've realized I'm not capable of being the father they need. You were right about everything, Clara. I don't deserve them." Jessica started to speak, but Clara raised a hand, silencing her. "You're right. You don't deserve them. But I'm not accepting your surrender of parental rights." Marcus looked confused. "Why not? I thought you'd want me gone completely." "Because the twins deserve better than a father who quit when things got hard," Clara said firmly. "Right now, you're a lesson in what not to be. But people can change, Marcus. Not quickly, not easily, but they can. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to continue supervised visitation. You're going to attend actual therapy, not 3-week performance therapy, but real, long-term work on why you treat people the way you do. And if in 5 years you've genuinely changed, if you become someone capable of loving those children without seeing them as assets, then we'll revisit custody arrangements." Marcus stared at her. "You're giving me a chance? After everything?" "I'm giving my children a chance to have a father who's worth knowing," Clara corrected. "Whether you become that person is entirely up to you. But understand this, Marcus. If you ever, and I mean ever, try to manipulate them, use them, or hurt them the way you hurt me, there is no corner of this earth where my father's resources won't find you. Are we clear?" "Crystal," Marcus whispered. He stood, nodded to both women, and left without another word. Jessica exhaled slowly. That was either incredibly generous or incredibly risky. "It was necessary," Clara said, "because I refuse to let his failures define my children's lives. They deserve the chance to know their father, even if he doesn't deserve to know them yet." That evening, Clara hosted a small dinner at the mansion. Margaret was there, Mrs. Chun, Jessica, and Patricia Gonzalez from the Women's Empowerment Coalition. The twins sat in high chairs, smearing food everywhere and laughing at their own mess. "To Clara," Margaret said, raising her glass, "who turned midnight rain into morning sunshine. To second chances," Mrs. Chun added. "Both the ones we give ourselves and the ones we give others." Clara looked around the table at these women who'd become her family, at the mansion that had transformed from prison to sanctuary, at her children who would grow up knowing their mother had fought for them with intelligence and grace rather than bitterness and rage. "To my father," she said softly, "who taught me that protection isn't just about defense. It's about building something strong enough that the people you love never need defending." They drank, they laughed, and later, after everyone had gone home, Clara carried the twins upstairs to their nursery. She decorated it herself, soft blues and gentle yellows, nothing like the cold elegance Marcus had preferred. She laid them in their cribs, watched them settle into sleep, and whispered the words she said every night. "You are loved. You are protected. And you will always know that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up, documenting everything, and making sure nobody can knock you down twice." Outside, the city lights glowed steady and warm. The mansion that had witnessed her humiliation now stood as proof of her triumph. The foundation her father had envisioned was changing lives. The legacy she thought lost had been reclaimed and expanded into something that would outlast them all. Clara Ward had been thrown out at midnight, barefoot and broken. She'd returned in a Rolls-Royce, armed with evidence and unshakable dignity. And now, standing in the nursery, watching her children sleep, she understood the final truth her father had tried to teach her. Victory isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about building something so strong, so purposeful, so filled with love and justice that their attempts to destroy you become footnotes in a much larger story. The twins stirred, reached for each other across their cribs, tiny hands finding comfort in each other's presence. Clara smiled, turned off the light, and closed the door softly. Tomorrow she'd wake up and continue the work, helping women find their own paths from humiliation to triumph. But tonight, she simply existed in the quiet satisfaction of knowing that she'd done more than survive. She transformed suffering into purpose, pain into power, and midnight rain into a legacy that would shelter generations to come. The storm was over. The sun had risen. And Clara Ward, once discarded like garbage, now stood as proof that patience, preparation, and unwavering dignity could overcome any betrayal, any humiliation, any attempt to break a woman who refused to stay broken.